Don't use a calculator, but what's 20 times 4? Should be easy, right?
It's 80!
That quiz wasn't for no reason. It was a way for you to see
how you react to a challenge. Do you try to think it out like the thinker, or do you just pull up Google and use a calculator?
We all have heard or thought about it at some point, but are people getting dumber? Is there a reason why it feels like nobody has basic skills, don't have discernment skills, can barely spell, including me, and can't do simple arithmetic? Or it's a little more difficult than it needs to be.
And overall just makes it seem like we're doomed as a generation?
Well, it turns out people aren't actually, as the only evidence I could find was in the
NAEP, which is like one of those proctored tests, and all it said was the scores in math were lower than they were last year. So that's not really a tell that everybody's dumb, and on top of that, it's just one of them tests.
And that's what I sought to figure out. And it all has something to do with something called critical thinking skills.
Explain it simply, critical thinking skills is the ability to analyze something using your own knowledge or assumptions to come to a conclusion or idea, or literally just using your brain, like any normal person should. And it's a core part of life and something so basic that we all desperately need. Whether it's Google, AI, or even calculators, because think about it, at some point in time, people had to just use their brain for stuff like that. Of course, I'm always gonna use a calculator. Just think about the fact that somebody back in the day had to do that percentage calculation in their head instead of using a calculator. But let's get back to the point. Technology subverts a lot of the thinking people used to do, which is beneficial in a lot of areas and gives us ability to focus on more pressing issues and overall just more time in life in general to think. However, this is a blessing and a curse, as it leads to something called cognitive offloading, which is basically actively using external tools or systems to reduce the mental effort required for tasks. It includes everyday things like writing notes to remember stuff, setting reminders, or calendar alerts, as well as using calculators. But the problem comes in with overuse of things like Google and AI, which is said to lead to a decline in engagement and skill development. Also, your critical thinking skills. For example, there was a study called the Google effect, and basically the study was to figure out whether people thought of where to get the information versus just figuring it out on their own. Results said that people thought of the where versus the what, meaning people thought of Google before people thought of what to ask Google to solve their problem versus just thinking on how to solve the problems on their own. Furthermore, this decline leads to a mass problem with social media, as the less critical thinking skills you have, the more susceptible you are to passive acceptance of information, which is basically just you see information on TikTok and you're like, yeah, I believe that. On top of the fact that it leads you less to fact check information. So even if you aren't somebody that's just gonna passively accept it, you're less likely to go on Google and be like, is this real? For example, the paper was called The Spread of True and False News Online, and it was a paper to determine whether true or false news would spread faster. And it turns out false news is, because of the fact that it tends to be more novel, which basically means that it's more like interesting in a sense. So it's like it would be rather saying Komodo dragons are very big and they eat like boars, it'd be like dragons are real. So more people would be more likely to spread dragons are real because it's more novel, it's more like interesting. On top of that, because it gets an emotional reaction out of people, which is why on the paper the most spread false news with political news, as that tends to get the biggest emotional reactions out of people. And this study was done in 2006 to 2017, showing how big of a problem it already was and how it might be an even bigger problem today. The advent of AI, there's even more ways of subverting your critical thinking skills, as according to a paper called AI Tools in Society, Impacts on Cognitive Offloading in the Future of Critical Thinking, leading to a slew of problems, and with the addition of generative AI, making it even easier to make fake news. And since it's hard to fact check whether something is AI or AI backed, even though you can just check if it's real or not, because at this point, it don't matter. People won't do it, leading to a slew of problems. But is there any way to fix this? Or are we Well, to be honest, this is a problem that can be solved relatively easily, as you just need to build critical thinking skills. The only thing is people just gotta work a little for it, and that might be crazy based on the fact that people already subvert critical thinking skills all the time, so using them is out of the norm, which leads to my point.
Well, it might sound super like obvious, but the best way to use critical thinking skills is literally actively try and use your brain. Like, stop going for shortcuts in general. So if you're writing a paper, stop using ChatGPT and just try to write the paper, man. If you're trying to build your critical thinking skills, but if you aren't, go ahead and write that paper up with ChatGPT and get you an A on your test and be good.
And maybe instead of just accepting the news you see on the internet every single time, maybe look for the news on your own and come to your own conclusions. This isn't to make you distrustful of the internet. It's just to give you a way to make them critical thinking skills work.
Things like reading, writing, anything that actively challenges you to think about something and come up with your own idea or imagine something as to why books help, and just something that makes you like,
Critical thinking skills are a core and basic part of life, or at least they should be. It's sad to me that there's so many ways to subvert and just totally take out the idea of having them in general. Like, to me, this is such an easy and reversible issue, as all people have to do is just think a little and use their critical thinking skills more and just not be a bot. Yet there are really no signs of improvement. As the more technology advances, the more people have ways to subvert their intelligence, and then you can see where I'm going from here. It just gets worse and 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 worse, giving people less and less of a reason to build their critical thinking skills. So hopefully this sheds some light on, are we dumber? And hopefully I answered the question correctly. So like, comment, subscribe if you like this video.